Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody. First attempt at Sunday afternoon talks. Seems already it's successful. There. Reflecting on the Buddha's teachings, sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming how expansive or how detailed or refined the teachings can appear to be, and on a certain level, there's a lot, but it's also it's not. It's important to always recollect that the Buddha had a very clear agenda or a very clear perspective on what he was trying to accomplish and what he was giving us, so that the Buddha kept emphasizing over and over through his dispensation, that I teach dukkha and the cessation of dukkha. So it's keeping it fairly clear and particular. So as we practice and we develop the skills in learning and understanding the Buddha's teachings, it's always important and essential to keep reflecting on that point or that particular, agenda, and all the different teachings start to make sense, or start to see that they have this purpose for either highlighting, that which is the difficulty or the problem, and what is the way out of that, what is the solution. So when the Buddha in his very first teaching used the Four Noble Truths as the way of approaching his teaching, is a sense recognizing dukkha as something that is, the discontent, dissatisfaction, dis-ease, unsatisfactoriness of the human condition, the recognizing its cause, realizing its cessation, and cultivating the path leading to cessation of suffering. So and then that brings it back to something fairly practical. One of the great teachers in Thailand kind of had his own formulation of that, and saying he turned them around a bit, and then brought it back into the say the mind itself, the mind or thinking or projections, and saying the mind sent outside itself is the cause of dukkha, and say the result of the mind going outside itself, being sent outside itself, proliferating, thinking, conceiving, restlessly wandering here and there. That is suffering itself, and the mind, seeing the mind, is the path leading to cessation of suffering, and the result of the mind, seeing the mind, is the cessation of suffering itself. Just being able to be willing to look clearly at the mind, staying attuned to what the mind is doing, because we tend to be pulled along by it, dragged along by it, running after it, and whether it's in terms of our thoughts of seeking some kind of gratification or pleasure, or just fascination with things, or the thoughts of aversion, ill will, confusion, doubt, uncertainty. These are all just what the mind does. I mean, it thinks, it conceives, and we end up getting tangled into it, and we suffer. So just being able to step back and look at that more clearly, not in the sense of trying to force the mind not to think, not to conceive, not to have any ideas whatsoever, because that in itself is another kind of suffering. It's sort of kind of the mind sort of going outside the mind again. It's being able to just be present. It's like one of the the ways that Ajahn Mun, the great forest master in Thailand, and one of Ajahn Chah's teachers, he looked at it in terms of paying attention to the, say, the mind source and the mind end, in the sense that as long as we keep, say, running after the mind ends, where the mind goes out to, then we end up getting complicated and difficult. And if we pay attention to the mind source, we can return to maybe mind source, primal mind. There's um, there's lots of different maybe words that we could use for it, but I think it's something that is something that allows us to settle and be recognizing that the nature of the mind, of course, is to think, is to have moods, is to have certain projections and ideas. It's what our mind does, and we tend to say identify with it. We tend to pick it up as an identity. This is who I am. These are my thoughts, so this is what I must be. But all they are thoughts and moods, and to be able to just see it as a thought, as a mood. It's another impermanent, unstable, uncertain phenomena. There's a discourse where the Buddha is a very famous discourse where the Buddha just gives a very short summary of his teachings, saying to not hanker after the past, not to pin your expectations in the future, because the past is already gone, future's yet to come, but to establish a quality of awareness and knowing on each presently arisen phenomena as it arises, so that seeing these moods and thoughts and feelings as they arise and cease in the present moment, and to let them arise and cease. They can be impermanent, they can be uncertain, and because that's what they are. And it doesn't have to, we don't have to go up and down with them. We don't have to get elated or averse to them. It's just what minds do. And so it's a very liberating perspective. So that sense of being able to recognize it as okay, that is the way it is. So it's like Ajahn Sumedho, one of the refrains that comes through his teachings is this. He'll say, it's like this, and to be able to just be present. Oh, it's like this. Oh, the mind that is worrying and doubtful. It's like this. The mind that is certain and clear. It's like this. It's like this. Mind that is kind of greedy. It's like this. Mind that and the thoughts of generosity, and it's like this. And it's, of course, then you start seeing the different, the result that these different thoughts and impressions have on the mind, and what say the residual impression that it leaves, because say a thought of anger and irritation has a different residual impression on the mind than a thought of loving kindness. It just feels different, and we don't have to be desperately trying, I've got to think thoughts of loving kindness all the time. That just gets one sort of spinning out and agitated. And it's sort of like, but then it's but being able to step back and sort of say, oh, it's like delighting in the what is actually satisfying or soothing, pleasant, pleasing to the heart, and that because also that sense of mind and heart in English are kind of dichotomies that don't really exist in say in the Buddhist scriptural language. It's the whole spectrum, and so that paying attention to what that residual effect is. So the Buddha points to the, let's say, attending to thoughts of ill will, non-ill will, thoughts of renunciation, relinquishment, thoughts of and then thoughts of greed and stimulation, and not in terms of a moral sense of this is good and that's bad, but sort of say, what is it that allows the mind to increase in what is wholesome and skillful, what is settling and clear, and allows a decrease in the qualities of just dis-ease, discontent, unsettled states of being. So just paying attention to the effect, and then realizing, where can I put my attention? Where what is useful? So that as we cultivate our attention and awareness of our, say, the state of mind, state of being, the different thoughts and thought patterns, then we can start to pay attention. Well, what now? How do I work with it? Because it's nice. It's a nice ideal of say, attuning to freedom from suffering, freedom from agitation, peace, and contentment. But yeah, the mind still is thinking, is moving, is cranking out all sorts of ideas and moods. So what do we do? And I think Ajahn Chah's approach, very, very, very simple, but very potent in the sense of his encouragement to saying, there's really only two things that you need to do in Dhamma practice: know and let go. Okay, just so paying attention to the quality of knowing, of awareness, of discernment, knowing clearly. Okay, what am I experiencing? What's the tone of it? What's the feeling? How can I let go? How can I relinquish? Whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's peaceful, whether it's agitated, it's sort of knowing it in the sense of seeing, oh, like I was saying before, oh, it's like this. And then letting go, creating space around it, so that it's, one isn't desperately trying to hold on to and prop up the peaceful, the wise. I want to be a wise person. And you sort of, it crumbles the more desperately you try. So, but it's that quality of knowing and letting go that creates the space and ease that allows us to really manifest a sense of discernment and well-being. So that simple injunction of knowing and letting go. Other times Ajahn Chah would give different advice in the sense of, he said, sometimes you just have to learn how to look at the mind and whenever it moves, just point at it. It's just a liar. This is liar. And so that, because it's your mind's coming up with another story, another scenario, another proliferation, and it's just to call it and say, okay, there's the mind creating another story again, and we love our stories, whether it's the story of something that is something to look forward to, some sort of pleasure to look forward to, or it's the story of some regret or remorse or something that but it's still a story. So just being able to call that's the mind spinning out another kind of web of deceit that we keep following. So just being able to call it, not in a heavy-handed way, not in a sort of an absolute way, where you're trying to push away all kind of stuff. Because if we don't learn how to cultivate, that's part of what discernment is learning how to understand the ways that we can utilize the mind skillfully, the abilities of the mind skillfully. Because the way that we can lift up wholesome thought processes, that is a thought, and so that just we have to learn how to encourage it. But it's also just creating a bit of enough clarity so that we're not getting caught up, not getting swept up, not getting overcomplicating things. Also, it is sometimes as in the same sort of light of the pointing at the mind as a liar. But doing it in a light way. I mean, sort of like making certain absurd, realizing the absurdity of what the mind keeps conjuring up. Couple of things that have come to my mind that I've used as so sometimes the mind is it just it's trying to be heard. It's just trying to make its presence known, and this idea or this mood or this perspective is just sort of cranking away, trying to. And sort of looking at it, bringing up an image of like in the old Charlie Brown cartoons, when the adults are talking, and it's just it's just completely nonsense. It's just nonsense noise that's being made, and just sort of make that switch. It's okay. I can let it go. I can drop that. It's just it's just like like the children in the Charlie Brown cartoon, and the adults are droning away in the background. So this. Looking on the mind as in that way sometimes. So this is creating a sense of absurdity where you can create space and just drop it. And that fresh application of mindfulness and discernment, coming back to awareness, just being with the moment, coming back to the mind source. An image that came up another time for me was again, sometimes cartoons, they stick in the mind from the time you're a kid, and they just go on and on. So Foghorn Leghorn, for those who are old enough to know who Foghorn Leghorn is, and because sometimes it'd be either Foghorn Leghorn himself or different characters, well, particularly the dog, to Foghorn Leghorn. And it's just sort of, shut up, you know. It's just that, just sort of, that sort of, shut up. The mind's sort of going, and it's important that it's not. You're not using it as a kind of a heavy tool, like, shut up, with aversion, but it's more like highlighting the absurdity of the mind so that it can, okay, I can know, I can let go. This is no big, it's not such a big deal. Because that's what it feels like, whether it's, something that's irritating us or something that is just really compelling, really, or some opinion that we're holding, this is the way it really should be, and just creating some absurdity around that to get some space so we're not locked into it. And that's where that knowing and letting go, mind able to come back to the mind source, just that underlying ability of the and function of the mind to know things in their true nature and not be deluded, not be entangled, and it isn't and it isn't as if the mind doesn't and isn't capable of thinking, but it has to have a context. So it's like, the Buddha was extraordinarily able to think, to be able to come up with the different teachings that he gave over his 45-year dispensation, and ability to articulate his vision of truth and the way to access that truth. There are just so many different pathways into it that he articulated, and that arises out of thought, reflection. But it's not an intellectual analysis. It's using thought so that it is of benefit to ourselves, using the moods of the mind, the objects of the mind, so that being able to pay attention to what it comes back to, well, what's the residual feeling or result after this thought, this mood that comes up? Because if it's aligned with Dhamma, aligned with truth, it's not going. The mind is going to be. It's going to be steady. It's going to be clear. There's going to be a sense of well-being. It's just that is the nature of the whole process. That's the nature of how what accords with Dhamma and what doesn't accord with Dhamma. So it's just learning how to tune into that, and that's say we have to learn how. One, we have to learn how to trust ourselves, and we have to learn how to experiment to sort of see, okay, what does that feel like? What does that result in? Where am I going with this? The one of the ways that it's sometimes expressed in the discourses is the Buddha or other disciples either personifying or casting the light in terms of Mara, sort of the tempter, as this is a say in the Buddhist scriptures, then there's different ways that Mara is presented, and sometimes it's say as an actual being, but it's also really when it's defined both as the movement of our inner defilements is the tempter, kilesa Mara. So that. But anyway, the one of the phrases that sort of comes up is sort of like that quality. Oh, I know you, Mara. So the mind's starting to crank something out, and there's that. Oh, I know you, Mara. So that knowing what the mind is doing, and then, of course, then Mara doesn't have a hold over the mind anymore, and there's a beautiful vignette where a bhikkhuni Vajira is in retreat in a forest and meditating and practicing, and then what comes up into her mind is like a kind of a doubt, a skeptical doubt, a doubt about nature of self, nature of being, and then if one personifies it as Mara as an external being or internal, the internal Mara of here's another doubt, speculation about self, about being, and then questioning that in the framework of what we take as our sense of being is something that is conjured up, and we put labels on it, and we take it as solid and real. And in the sutta, the Vajira, the Bhikkhuni Vajira, sort of said, who can this be? This is Mara. And so then just sort of calling out Mara, yes, I know you. This is the nature of the mind, and this is the nature of this question, is just speculation. Mind trying to come up with some concrete theory of what I am, what the world outside me is, and everything that I label it with is just these 5 khandhas, and I come up with a concept of being, of me. And then seeing that, and then sort of, and this is where the um, the image of she uses the image of chariot. In the same way that a chariot, you think of, has you think it has a solid existence, but all it is a name of something that has all sorts of different parts that come together to create it. So in the same way, that chariot doesn't have any inherent existence itself, neither does the sense of being or a sense of self. It's built up from different parts, different concepts, different feelings, and then we put a label on it and say, this is me, this is my being. And it doesn't have a solid existence. So that reflection and that reflective process of just saying, oh, what's going on here? Oh, this is speculation. This is the mind going outside itself. And of course, they're saying that formulation of the Four Noble Truths, that disciple of Ajahn Mun used, said the mind going outside itself is the cause of dukkha. And the result following it is going to be dukkha. So then the mind seeing the mind, okay, oh, this is the mind proliferating. This is the mind speculating. This is the mind worrying. This is the mind doubting. The mind seeing the mind is the path leading to cessation of dukkha. And the result of that is this sense that it can drop, it can let go. And it's like that, I know you, Mara. And that there's an opening, a possibility of opening into peace and clarity, knowledge, true knowledge. So this practice that the Buddha has given us is again, it can seem as if it's so huge, so much to develop, so much to cultivate, but it's coming back to fundamental principles and being able to come back to our experience. What is the experience of well-being? What is the experience of dukkha? How do we recognize that propensity for complication and difficulty and be ready to relinquish it, release it? Because so often we're not ready to release it. Really, we see it seems like we should be kind of digging in and hold that view that had been, hold that grudge, follow that attachment, because that's what it feels like at the time. But its result, of course, is dukkha, and to be able to recognize that, see it clearly, and be ready to relinquish, to set down, and just that in itself is a movement into peace. That is that ability to just release and let go. That's it. So just knowing and letting go, and just learning how to play with that. And it's important to play with it in the sense that it's not sort of some dogma, I've got to know and let go. Okay, and then you sort of force yourself into knowing and letting go, and just creates more dukkha. But just playing with that sense of how can I know this? How can I know this clearly? What is the quality of knowing? What is this experience of letting go? How can I how can I let go? What's that mean? So it's more like an exploration that we take an interest in and hold it lightly, so that it's so easy for the human heart to be oppressed by so much, and to be able to find the tools to create space and light that we can really experience and feel, and recognize that there is a path leading to cessation of dukkha. I'll offer that for reflection this afternoon.